Deion Sanders doesn't usually break character. When he talks, it's confident, controlled, and calculated. But this time was different. No jokes, no charm, just frustration. Because behind the scenes, while most fans were arguing stats and rankings, something much bigger was happening to his son. Something Deion says most people weren't supposed to notice. And according to him, Shadur Sanders wasn't just fighting defenses this season, he was fighting the system. From the moment Shadur entered the NFL conversation, the pressure felt different. Not the normal rookie pressure. Not the welcome to the league growing pains. This was louder, heavier, and way more personal. Before he ever had a real runway, narratives were already locked in. Opinions were formed, labels were attached, and no matter what he did on the field, those labels followed him snap after snap. That's the part nobody wants to talk about, because Shadur didn't come in with excuses. He came in thrown straight into chaos. No full training camp, limited reps with the starters, constant changes around him, brutal weather games, and yet he was expected to look polished immediately. No grace period, no patience, just results, whatever else. And the second something went wrong, the knives came out. Every interception became proof he wasn't ready. Every batted ball turned into a referendum on his ability to read defenses. Meanwhile, other quarterbacks around the league were making the same mistakes, sometimes worse, and getting a completely different reaction. For them, it was growing pains. For Shadur, it was confirmation. That's when Deion stopped playing nice. He made it clear this wasn't normal rookie adversity. In his words, Shadur was dealing with uphill battles both inside the building and outside of it. Coaches hesitant to commit, decision-makers slow to trust, and a media cycle that seemed way more interested in tearing him down than actually evaluating the tape. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, because the criticism never stayed consistent. Arm strength one week, decision-making the next, leadership after that. Even his personality became part of the debate. His confidence, when something quarterbacks are usually praised for, suddenly became a problem. Not poise, not command, but arrogance, cockiness. As if knowing you belong is only acceptable for certain players. That's when the conversation shifted into uncomfortable territory. One mistake from Shadur would dominate headlines. Another quarterback throws a pick six. Context immediately appears. Protection broke down. Receiver ran the wrong route. Scheme issues. Timing. Suddenly football becomes complicated again. But with Shadur, it was always simplified into one lazy conclusion. He's the problem. That's not analysis. That's branding. And Deion wasn't the only one noticing. Quietly, former players, analysts, and fans started saying the same thing. Teammates spoke about Shadur's preparation, his command in the huddle, his calm under pressure. But those voices barely moved the needle. The narrative was already set. Until one voice changed everything. Mel Kiper Jr. doesn't jump into drama. He doesn't chase clicks. He's built his reputation on film study and consistency. So when he came out and said that media members pushing the idea that Shadur Sanders wasn't good this season were lying, not mistaken, but lying, the temperature changed instantly. That wasn't a hot take. That was an indictment. Because Mel Kiper gains nothing by defending Shadur Sanders. There's no personal connection, no Sanders loyalty, no reason to step into that fire unless the tape backs it up. And according to him, it did. What Kiper exposed was the hypocrisy hiding in plain sight, the moving goalposts, the uneven standards. The way Shadur was judged harsher, faster, and louder than quarterbacks in nearly identical situations. And then he asked a question that no one could answer cleanly. Why is Shadur Sanders getting crushed for interceptions, while Joe Burrow throwing interceptions in the same season is still praised as elite? That question hit like a brick. Because when Burrow throws picks, the excuses line up instantly. Offensive line issues, receiver mistakes, timing problems, scheme flaws. Context floods the conversation. But with Shadur, context disappears. Protection breakdowns don't matter. Receiver errors don't exist. Defensive disguises don't get mentioned. Everything gets boiled down to one thing. He's not good enough. That's not football discussion. That's selective outrage. And the difference matters. Burrow is a veteran, years in the league, multiple training camps, full organizational support, continuity. He's been allowed to fail, adjust, reset, and grow without his credibility being questioned every single week. Shadur didn't get that luxury. He was treated like a finished product instead of a developing quarterback. Held to standards veterans aren't even. From the outside, it's easy to point at stats, interceptions, and box scores. But behind the scenes, Deion says Shadur was fighting battles most young quarterbacks never have to deal with. No real training camp, no consistent reps with the starters, no clear commitment from the staff. One week you're preparing like the future, the next you're treated like an afterthought. And yet, despite all of that, Shadur kept showing up, kept competing, kept surviving situations that would have broken most rookies. And that's the part Deion says people conveniently ignore, because pressure followed Shadur long before his first meaningful NFL snap. The moment he entered the draft conversation, the narrative started forming. Not based on what he did on the field, but on who he was connected to. Being Deion Sanders' son didn't just open doors, and it raised suspicion. Suddenly, confidence was labeled arrogance. Leadership was labeled entitlement. And expectations weren't just high, they were unforgiving. Every throw mattered more. Every mistake echoed louder. And there was no grace period. It didn't take long for the uneven treatment to become obvious. One interception from Shadur turned into a week-long debate about whether he belonged. Meanwhile, other quarterbacks threw picks and the excuses lined up instantly. Bad protection, bad routes, scheme issues, growing pains. With Shadur, context disappeared. The blame was immediate and absolute. And once that pattern starts, it's hard to unsee it. Deion didn't mince words. He made it clear that fairness was never part of the equation this season. Not from the coaching staff, not from decision-makers, and definitely not from certain media voices who seemed locked into a conclusion before the season even unfolded. No matter how composed Shadur looked in meetings, no matter how teammates responded to him, no matter how he handled brutal conditions and inconsistent support, the narrative refused to change. And then things got even more uncomfortable when people started openly saying what many fans were already thinking, that if something happened to the starter, Shadur wouldn't even be next in line, that he'd be passed over, that the team didn't really see him as an option. At that point, it stopped feeling like competition and started feeling like resistance. The criticism came fast and from every angle. Arm strength got nitpicked. Decision-making got questioned. His ability to read NFL defenses was treated like an impossible leap, despite evidence to the contrary. Even his personality became a talking point. The same confidence praised in other quarterbacks was suddenly a problem when it came from him. And that's where the conversation crossed from football into something else entirely. Because when mistakes are treated as fatal flaws for one player and learning moments for another, that's not analysis. That's selective judgment. Deion saw it happening in real time, week after week, headline after headline, and eventually he did what leaders do when silence becomes dishonest. He spoke up. But what really shifted the energy was when Deion wasn't the only one saying it anymore. Enter Mel Kiper Jr. This isn't a hot take artist. This isn't a social media personality chasing clicks. This is one of the most respected evaluators in football history. A guy whose reputation is built on film, consistency, and calling it straight. And when Mel Kiper said plainly and without hesitation that media members pushing the idea that Shadur Sanders wasn't good this season were lying, the room changed. That wasn't debate. That was an indictment. Mel Kiper gains nothing by defending Shadur Sanders. There's no family tie, no agenda, no reason to step into controversy unless the tape backs it up. And according to him, the tape tells a very different story than the one being sold. The issue wasn't performance. It was perception. Kiper pointed out the hypocrisy hiding in plain sight. The moving goalposts, the uneven standards. The way Shadur was judged faster, harsher and louder than other quarterbacks in similar situations. And once that door opened, it became impossible to close. Because now the question wasn't just about Shadur anymore. It was about why certain players are allowed to struggle while others are punished for it. Nobody pretended the interceptions didn't happen. Mistakes